Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This tutorial is to help if you run out of some striped pattern paper when you're making your Christmas cards for this holiday season. I'll be using my MFT Pinstripe background stamp to create this red and white pattern paper. The other products I'll be using is the Christmas Scrappy stamp from Sweet November Stamps. I just love that gorgeous big smile on his face. And I'll be cutting that out with a stitch circle die to create a kind of circled feature for the front of the card. And as I mentioned, the Pinstripe background stamp. Now to create my pattern paper, I've just cut out a bit of smooth white cardstock, cut a little bit bigger than the stitch rectangle die I'll be using to cut that out. Now as the Pinstripe background stamp is rubber backed, I'm just going to take the rubber out of my Misti, and I do have some low tack tape on the base of my Misti to stick my piece of cardstock down so it won't move with the stamping. And I'm going to be facing my pinstripes vertically and attach that to the front of my Misti door. The red I'll be using is the Candied Apple Distress Oxide, but you can use any red ink that you've got in your stash. So I'm just applied a smooth layer over my stripes. Just give that a good press down. As you can see, it's missed a few bits and missed at the edges. So I'm just going out a little bit further and just making sure I press those sections that did get missed in my stamping. So we still need to do it, so just keep layering it up. That's the great thing about the Misti. You can just keep reapplying and knowing that it's not going anywhere and that everything will stamp in exactly the same spot. So it's still missing a little bit of colour, so just keep going. And I think we'll most probably get it on this one. I'm just making sure I'm giving that a good press down. And I've just grabbed out a cloth just to help smooth that over. So I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll set that aside to dry while we do our Copic colouring. I'm just going to go in with my lightest coloured first to work out where all my shadows are going to be. So obviously I'm going to have the light coming from the top left hand side of my card. So the hat will throw a little bit of shadow over his face, and anything on that right hand side will be quite shadowed as well. Now that I've got that worked out, I'm going to grab my darkest marker and put some shadows in for where that hat's throwing over. And then I'm going to start working my little texture for the fur. So I'm going to keep it quite textured on the right hand side, and then kind of work out to a smoother finish over on the left as we work through our colours. So obviously that collar will throw a shadow as well as between those legs and the back sections of his legs. So I'm just doing a little flick out of that colour, but where the shadow is, I'm just doing a smooth blend out where that hat throws the shadow, and then we'll start making that hair texture by just doing little flicking motions, just really lifting that pen up as we move out into our highlight section. So just doing our little flicks up from that fur tail and his leg, where that little leg is on the inside away from the light source. And our next colour in the blend will be E55. I will have all the colours showing up on the top left hand side of the screen for you if you want to know any of the colours I used for this colouring. So again, just slowly flicking out, working into our highlight space with that E55. So as I said, this section is going to be quite in shadow over this side, so we'll only leave a little bit of highlight left at the very top of the leg and the very top of the tail. And then the next colour is E31. So we're just slowly working that shadow out and finishing off our colouring here. So we'll leave a little bit spot for our highlight colour, but colour up most of this as that's in the shadow on that right hand side. And our final colour for this blend is going to be E30, and making sure we fill in that full colour now for our highlight. Now I'm going to go back through because we did lose a little bit of that dimension with our little flicks and also the contrast. So we'll go back in with all of those colours again, starting with that darkest marker, the E59. Just obviously his nose throwing a little bit of shadow there, again with his collar and the back side of him away from the light source. Bringing that next colour, E44, in to work out that 2059. Just slowly doing that little flick out as we work into that light source. So obviously if you can get a nice kind of texture there, it just makes it look more realistic in your colouring. If you can get that fur or hair type look. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So sometimes it actually works out better not to try and be perfect because obviously nothing in nature normally is. So let's just keep working that shadow out, flicking out for that fur texture and working into our highlight section. So keeping that right hand side mainly in shadow, away from our light source. So our next colour is going to be our E31. Sorry, I did miss out the E43 in my previous colouring, so I'm just bringing that in this time just to flick out that E55. And just flicking down and up again, so just kind of going in different directions the way that that fur has been drawn by the artist. Bring that E31 back in, slowly working to our highlight, which we'll leave for our final colour, the E30. And now that's going to fully colour in our image. And to slowly flick up to that highlight spot. So I'm just going to colour up that cute little Santa hat now. So I'm going in with my lightest marker to work out where my shadows will be. So obviously his ear will be throwing a shadow on that bottom section of the hat, as well as the back of that hat and where this kind of folds over. Now for my shadow colour or my contrast colour, I'm going in with BV17. Only just putting a small amount of that in to add our contrast. Then I'll go directly over with the darkest marker in our red combo, which is R29, but just extend that out slightly so you can see that colour as well as the colour that combines with the BV17. The next colour in our combo will be R27, and just slowly working out that into that white space. And this section down here will be fully coloured now because it will be the darkest section of the hat. R24 is our next colour, leaving a small amount for our highlight colour, that R22 again. So now we're finished colouring up the hat. We'll also go in and do his little eyes. So for the whites, I'm just going to use my C markers, C3, C1 and C00, still leaving a little bit of white cardstock there so that that eye still looks white. And I'm going to make him a brown-eyed boy, so I'm going in with my markers E29, 27 and finish off with E23 to finish off that combo. And I did lose a little bit of the catch lights in his eyes, so I'm just going to bring in my jelly roll pen and just pop that in to make those catch lights again. Just really livens those eyes up. Now I'm going to do the collar the same color as the hat, but obviously it is a little bit smaller, so I'm not worrying about putting my shadows in first. I'm just going to go straight in with the darker color to put the shadows in, and I'll only get through to 24, so R27 next, because it's not a lot of room. We won't be using the R22 in this combo. So we'll finish coloring that up now with the R24 as our highlight color. Now for the hat, I'm just going to be adding a few shadows in. So obviously where that folds under and where this kind of folds in, I'll be adding some shadow, and obviously our shadow on the right side away from our light source. The next color will be W1 to blend that out. And again, we're going to be leaving some white cardstock so this still reads as white, but we wanted to have that shadow in. And we'll blend that into the white cardstock, just really softening that so that it blends nicely with that white cardstock with our W00. Now to colour up his mouth, I'm just being very careful around those teeth and popping our E04 in first, adding a little bit of shadow in with W5 and go back over that with our E04. And we'll colour up that little tongue Oh, we'll do his nose first, sorry. So W10, and we're going to leave a little bit of white cardstock at the top so it does look like a nice shiny nose. So slowly work up there so you just got that little bit of white shining on the top. Now I forgot to do the dots on that little bauble down the bottom, so I'm going to get that in, and that finishes that hat up. And just making sure I've got that shadow on that right hand side, lightening to a lighter on the mouth. Now we'll colour that tongue up. So that finished that. It's only quite small, so we didn't need very many colours, and I'm just adding a little bit of shadow to those teeth as well. They're quite small, but I didn't want to miss out on colouring them up. And now we'll finish colouring up his collar, so anything of the metal I'm just going to do the same, so his little tag and also where those clips are, with my T markers, and finish colouring that up. So just a 3 combo on that. And I don't want to forget his little nails, so I've popped a little colour in on those as well. Now that our striped cardstock is dry, I'm just going to use my stitch rectangle die to run that through the die cutting machine, and now we've got a perfect striped panel with that beautiful stitching detail around the outside. We'll also use our stitch circle die to cut out our little Scrappy. So I've just grabbed out some purple tape, but I want to do some grounding at the bottom of Scrappy, so I'm just going to move this down as low as I can with my circle die to add that grounding in after I cut this out. So I'm just going to run that through my die cutting machine, and now I'm going to quickly run through some grass underneath our Scrappy. I thought using some, green markers will really kind of set this as a Christmas card with a nice green and red combo. So I'm just working through those. I've added my shadow in first, and then blending that out with YG07, YG05. And it's best to do this when you've got this cut out so that you don't go fully across, and you can just blend it out to the shape of the circle. So that's our grass done. Now we want to attach our striped card base to our card front. So I'm just going to glue that up on the back, and I have cut and scored a red card base off camera. So I'm just going to open that up and make sure I'm popping this on the right side. So center that in the middle, make sure it's fully lined up on all 4 sides, and give that a good press down. And we want to prop up our little Scrappy so that he's our focus for our card. So I've grabbed out some foam tape, and we'll get that strategically placed to support him all the way along. Put a longer bit in the middle and 2 shorter bits at the top and bottom, and we'll just set that aside while we get our sentiment ready. So I'm going to be using some black cardstock to do some white heat embossing, and I'm just going to be using this sentiment from the Happy Pawlidays stamp set from My Favorite Things. So line that up on my black cardstock and pop it on my front of my Misti. Just add a bit of anti-static powder tool to make sure that our heat embossing powder only goes to where we want it. Stamp up with our Watermark ink. Give that a double stamp to make sure we've got a nice impression. And then we'll grab out our little folded piece of printer paper to catch our excess embossing powder. Give that a sprinkle, tap it off any excess, and then we can pop that straight into our container. Now there were a couple of little stray pieces of white heat embossing powder, so I like to use a kind of slotted paint brush to wipe that off, just being very careful around our sentiment. I've preheated our heat tool, and we'll go in and get that all nice and melted. And with our glass mat, we can just do that straight onto that. So once that's melted, I'll set that aside to dry and cool down before I wipe it off with a cloth to get rid of that anti-static powder tool residue. And now we're going to run that through. Now I didn't have a double-ended banner die that I have in my stash, but this one seemed to fit perfectly, but I wanted the banner both sides. So I'm going to run this side through my die cutting machine. And once that cuts that, I'm going to flip that banner die around, and we're going to cut that banner at the other end in the same position that we did the other end. So you just have to line that up and you'll feel those little stitchings lock into place. You can see me wiggling that to make sure that's locked in place. We'll stick that down with that purple tape again to hold it. You don't need to run it right through because we're only just cutting that end. And now we've got the perfect double-ended banner die. Now we'll get our elements attached to the front to make sure I'm putting it on the right side. I've just quickly opened that card up to make sure I'm setting this on the correct side and not upside down. So I'm just using my reverse tweezers to line that up. I do want my sentiment down the bottom, so I'm keeping that higher up the top, but we want to make sure that that's centered on the right and the left. So it was a little out, so because I didn't press that down, it's quite easy to pull that up, and we'll give that another try. I did put it down too low, so push that up a little bit higher. And making sure I'm centering it, trying to stand up while I do this, because standing up you can see it a little bit better. Measure that again, and I'm happy with that now, so we'll give that a press down. Now I'm also going to prop up our sentiment with some foam tape to match in with our Scrappy. So get that attached, take off the release paper, and now we're just going to line that up at the bottom, just making sure that that banner's centered on either side and that it's nice and straight, and give that a press. Now I pulled out some red gems from my stash, and I'm just going to use my pickup tool just to work out where I want these to be placed. So I've got two kind of bigger ones and one small one. So we want to kind of bring our eye down to our image and then down to our sentiment. So I'm just working out where these go and just kind of shuffling them around, just using that pickup tool to make sure I've got them in the right spot. And now that I'm happy with that, I'm just going to grab out my glue, just pop a little dot on there and get that attached using that pickup tool. And this one didn't want to pick up. It seemed to have like a little bit of glue already stuck on it. I think these were some that I had in my stash that had a little bit of glue sitting there on them, but they weren't really well glued. So I'm going to glue them down as well. So I'm going to pop a little bit of glue down the bottom, and we'll finish off the final two with a little bit of glue. I find it easier to use my right hand for everything. I'm not very good at being ambidextrous. Got that lined up, and then we'll pop that final little one down below that. Just a small amount of glue on that will hold that into place. So we'll just give that time to dry. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. Scrappy is so cute and he looks so gorgeous in that little Santa hat, and just using something that you have in your stash like the pinstriped stamp that I used, or even like a pinstriped stencil if you don't have any pattern paper that match in with this, to make a few quick Christmas cards. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.